Scanning for audio.
Welcome to a Tin Dog podcast, this time talking about Classic Doctors, New Monsters, Volume 2. Like the last time, this is 4 individual stories. Well, arguably, we'll get back to that. It's 4 stories. Yeah, let's go with that. But the Doctor's order is slightly different. You've got 4, 5, 6, 8. Now, each individual story's got a bit of a... Well, let's go for the synopsis, then I'll review each one. Again, as always, you know the drill. No spoilers, yeah? Because you want to listen to these stories, you want to know if they're good, but you don't want to not listen to these stories because you know what happens. Does that make sense? I mean, obviously, you know, it's a Doctor Who story. You kind of know that the Doctor's probably going to win. I'm not putting any spoilers out there about that because, let's face it, that's fair enough. But you know what I mean. You don't want too many intricacies. You want to just know if it's any good, which of course it is, and you want to know what they're about. Well, that's fair enough. That's what I'm here for. So first off, you've got Night of the Vashta Nerada. You know the drill. You've heard the first one. It's basically monsters from the new series versus Doctors from the old series. Yes, I know that demarcation line's long been gone, but bear with me because you know what we're talking about. Now, obviously, you know, part of me wants actually new Doctors versus old aliens because I am, if nothing, a traditionalist. I want to see Peter Capaldi take on the Bandrills. Yeah. Okay, there's a bit of silence there. I get that. That's not a problem. Okay, let's start. Story 1, Night of the Vashta Nerada by John Dorney. Look, here's the synopsis and then I can talk about it. Funworld was set to be the happiest planet in the galaxy. A planet of joy, euphoria, of laughter and delight. Except the construction was marred by reports of a predator. And then a few days before opening, all communication ceased. Owner Georgia Donnelly is desperate to open the resort and has hired Amanda Steele's crew to find out what happened on the planet. They're the best, but even they might not be up to the task. Joined by the Doctor and picked off one by one, they slowly start to realise that something terrifying lurks in the shadows. You know it's a great story, let's face it, it's got John Dorney's name on the front, so it's going to be good. It's the Vashta Nerada. Yes, I know they kind of ate in silence, but on audio you kind of get that slight chomping sound effect, and you know what? I can live with that. I can completely live with that. It's great. It's a great story, a great start to this box set, and it's nice to have the 4th Doctor hanging around with the others. Look, if you're a fan of the new series and you're tempted to go and listen to something from Big Finish, or even tempted to go back and experience some of the old Doctors but you don't know where to start, these 2 box sets, this one and the last one especially, are definitely worth doing. There were the Angels and Everyone's Tread in the last story. Let's face it, the 6th Doctor story is a gem. They're a great introduction to the old Doctors if you've don't know what they're doing. And if old-fashioned effects really grate on you, then, well, this is a place to start as well. But that's beside the point. Is it a good story? Of course it is. Is Tom completely on form? Yes. The intergalactic rodent killers, a bit like the crew from Aliens, only a bit more practical and a bit more British, are great. Yes, there's a psychic on board, but that's because you kind of need them to communicate with Vashta Nerada. It's a plot device, but it is handled very well. Again, you've got Funworld, but not quite. You've got darkness. Oh, it's just very, very well executed. Leads into story number 2, which for me is the weakest of the lot, but that's mainly because of the choice of monster. And I know it's new monsters, and every Doctor you ever talk to, every actor you ever talk to, doesn't call them monsters. They call them creatures. Because they are just aliens. People who aren't human. You know, the also people. So, Empire of the Racnos by Stock Hancock is a good story. It brings together everything you'd expect about the Racnos into one place, except nobody really likes the Racnos. I mean, let's face it, they're not Le Slovene. But when you saw them in that one Christmas special, you were expecting to be all skittering about. But they were utterly panto. They just didn't press any of my buttons. I kind of just waited for them to go. The best thing they ever did was give motivation for the Doctor's demise in turn left. I just didn't quite get it, but here's the synopsis and I'll let you decide for yourself. When a distress call rips the TARDIS from the vortex, dragging it back through time, it arrives amidst the conflict between Gallifrey and an ancient foe. The Doctor, as ever, wants to help, but in returning a wounded combatant home, he becomes further and further entangled in a web of deceit and recrimination, a web spun by an 8-legged empress and her minions. The Empire of the Racnos is at war, and wherever he stands, the Doctor is on the wrong side. Like I said, I'm just not a fan of the Racnos. There's just too much shouting. But they are true to their nature. They are just massive spiders. And admittedly of late I've had to deal with a few massive spiders of my own in this house. But that's another story for another time. Story number 3, The Carrionite Curse. Now, with the first box set, Colins' story, the Sixth Doctor story, was definitely the standout gem. It's the one that you think about immediately if somebody mentions the Classic Monsters box set. That and, of course, the remarkably good Sycorax tale. Here we've got the Carrionites, who were admittedly just screechy witches, from a story that was never my favourite either. But of course, what Colins Doctor does is bring to us something new, fresh, thoughtful, and just damn good. It makes you reevaluate the old story, which, let's face it, is a pretty good trick. This is by Simon Grurier, and here's the trailer. Katie Bell returns to a Midlands home to find strange goings-on at the Buskers Fair, a witch trial in the 1980s, a bonfire ready to be lit. Luckily, a colourful visitor is already investigating, and Katie's dad is versed in tales of the macabre. Terrifying forces are on the loose, and the town hall holds its secret. There is black magic in the Black Country, and the Doctor has the name of the enemies on the tip of his tongue. Something wicked this way comes. You know what? I loved this story, but the reason I loved it was Katie. Katie Bell is so much a companion ideal for the Sixth Doctor. She just gives nothing. And yes, you know what? I am a pushover for a goth in any drama. I truly am. I am so easily swayed by a woman in black that it is a bit ridiculous. And the idea of the Sixth Doctor in his multicoloured clothes hanging around with someone dressed in the way I knew I used to in the 80s gets my vote. Truly does. The story is brilliant. Let's face it, it's got witches. What more do you need? And the Carrionites, well, that just works, doesn't it? The power of language has never been so great, and the power of language is just, well, impressive when it comes to the Sixth Doctor. I'm not going to spoil any more than that, but I do need to say that this is for me the highlight of the entire box set, which brings us rather nicely full circle to the Vashta Nerada, but here we have Day of the Vashta Nerada. Day of the Vashta Nerada by Matt Fitton. This time it's the 8th Doctor taking them on. Well, here's the synopsis. As the Time War rages, Cardinal Alistra of Gallifrey seeks to create ever more dangerous weapons to deploy against the enemy. When the Doctor stumbles across Synthesis Station, he discovers that the Time Lords have sponsored a project to weaponize already lethal creatures, but in doing so, Eva Morrison and her team unwillingly create a colony of Vashta Nerada with a very unfortunate history of humanoid contact. The Doctor finds himself leading a desperate race for survival, in which the shadows may be the least of their worries. Yes, it's the same Vashta Nerada from the first story, but they're so much worse and so much harder. It's hard-bitten space station filmed in a single studio gloriousness. It's got Alistra in it. I am a happy camper. Yes, I know that basically they've taken the War Doctor stories and then they've converted them into Paul McGann stories, and I can so live with that because that new box sets will be coming. We are actually getting what we should have got in the first place, which is the 8th Doctor as the person in the war, as the villain, as the person who would have pressed the button, as the warrior. The descent and character evolution would have worked if they'd just stuck with Paul in the first place and not used John Hurt. But that's me getting on my soapbox. What I'm here to talk about is how good this story is, and it's great. What you needed was the first Tom Baker story to set everything up, and that's fine. But as a whole, this one's great, but it just picked at the post by the Carrionite story. It's a superb box set, and like I said, if you've not experienced these old Doctors, and where have you been, and what are you doing listening to this podcast, well, go for it. This is a good start, and you will not be disappointed. This and its predecessor, obviously Volume 1, are great investments, and they're not that expensive. For the sake of £20 or £23 if you want the CDs, and let's face it, you do, then this is a good start. With that, I'll play you the trailer and let you decide for yourself. So until next time, be seeing you. Oh, and by the way, the UFO Cast is coming very soon.
Coming soon, the UFO Cast. I'm Luke.
And I'm Michael.
Coming soon from Big Finish Productions. Classic Doctors, New Monsters, Series 2.
I see only darkness.
Darkness?
She thinks they were eaten by the dark.
There is a species I know of that matches that description. They're called the Vashta Nerada.
Yes, they know that name.
The what?
Vashta Nerada.
Open fire!
Is anyone still alive out there? I picked up your distress call, and I promise I mean no harm.
This plan of yours was foolish. There is still no sign.
So you keep saying.
Doctor?
Guest! No, get away from me! Empress, I am warning you.
Warn away, my little man. Consider this a taste of what's to come.
Thou shalt not suffer a witch to live.
What? You're surely not going to...
You three have answered guilty to the charge of crimen acceptum.
We are, after all, witches.
What's happening? They're glowing.
What was and yet shall be. I and my mother set free.
Well, there's someone here, a Time Lord, calls himself a doctor?
I can handle the Doctor myself.
All the emergency systems that should kick in have been locked off in these sections. We're isolated from the main hub.
Turn around, very slowly. What's that behind you on the glass?
It is my shadow.
Cast by what?
The glass! If the Vashta Nerada are past the primary and secondary shielding...
They're almost here.
There's something on the other side. It's like they're trying to get in.
Big Finish. We love stories.
That was the Doctor Who Tin Dog Podcast, available on iTunes, YouTube, Twitter, RSS, Vimeo, and across the internet. Doctor Who and its associated properties are all copyright and trademark of the BBC. No infringement is intended. Why not become a supporter by visiting patreon.com/tindog. Contact the show on tin-dog@hotmail.co.uk. The Tin Dog Podcast is a founder member of the Doctor Who Podcast Alliance.